Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have something a little bit different for you. I've been just having a lot of conversation with friends and family, talking to them a bit about sneakers and the whole sneaker world as a whole. And I noticed there's really no good resource that helps outline a lot of the similar themes, a lot of the same, part of the culture really of sneakers. And so it's a bit intimidating for someone who wants to understand sneakers, wants to get into the culture, because there's so much information out there and a lot of it just kind of repeats itself and it's not very clear as to what it is they're getting across. So this video will be part of a series that will really go deeper and deeper into the sneaker culture for those of you that are interested in sneakers, for those of you that want to understand the world of sneakers. This will be for you. And again, it'll go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. And for those of you that know me in my real life, one of my favorite things is really to learn something. And once I feel like I have a decent understanding of it, I love sharing that information for people who are interested. And so that's what I want to do in these videos. So before we get into it, I would just like to have you pause and take 1 second out of your day to please support me by going to the bottom, clicking like, clicking subscribe. That little bit of effort, those 2 seconds that it takes you to do that goes such a long way for me, and I would really appreciate it. And again, subscribing to the channel is always free. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to be answering 4 big questions that are always asked and that are probably one of the top Googled questions when it comes to sneakers. So number 1, why are sneakers getting so popular nowadays? Why does it seem like everyone's into sneakers, or a lot of people are buying a lot of sneakers? Number 2, why are sneakers so expensive? Why do some sneakers that are only a couple dollars to make end up costing hundreds if not thousands of dollars? Number 3, if I'm interested in getting into sneakers or want to buy my first pair of sneakers, what should I get? Number 4, if I have someone in my life who is a sneakerhead, what should I get them as a gift? What are some good gift ideas? What would I like to get as a sneakerhead for gifts for myself? So with that, let's get started. And what we're going to start off with is actually a bit of the foundations too, that I think are really important for us to have some sort of common ground to set up before we actually get into the video. So that's going to be covering sneaker anatomy. So we're going to show pictures of sneakers, talking about what are the different parts of sneakers, how some sneakers are unique and have certain characteristics or parts that not other sneakers have, what makes them unique, and then a little bit of the terminology before we get into the questions. With that, let's get started. So starting off with one of the most common phrases you'll hear when talking about sneaker anatomy is the upper. So the upper is really everything that's not the midsole or the sole. So it's the entire upper, it's all the materials that really kind of are the parts that wrap around your foot when you're wearing the sneaker. The next part, kind of, which is the section right above where your toes would be, is called the toe box. The parts that are circled in green are what are called eyelets. So that's, or also called lace loops, which is where the laces would go through to tighten your sneaker. Next is called the tongue, which I'll show in a better picture, but that's what's called the tongue. Not all sneakers have tongues, which was news to me recently. And so the next part of it is the liner or sock liner, which is the part that actually comes into contact with your foot when you put inside. It's the part that's like lines the inside of the sneaker. On the back we have the heel, and then as we're moving to the bottom, so this is a bit complicated because not all sneakers are made the same, and that's part of the fun of sneakers, is that you'll get to see what kinds of like really cool designs people come up with, and they're not all going to be the same. They're not all going to have the same parts. Not every sneaker, like I'd mentioned, is going to have a tongue. Not all of them are going to have laces. So this is the midsole. So the midsole itself is the center part of the sneaker that actually provides your foot support. And so the sole is the bottom part that's in yellow, and that's the part that actually comes into contact with the ground. So now if we look at this other view of these same pair of sneakers but from the top, we can see that, again, starting from left to right, so there's the laces, there's the insoles. The insoles themselves are usually inserts, or usually kind of like these floppy little foot-shaped pieces that go inside of the sneaker that the bottom of your foot comes into contact with. And not all sneakers, again, will have these. Moving on to the liner or sock liner, this one might be a little bit easier to see because this is the actual like kind of padded and lined piece that your foot again would come into contact. There's the tongue tag on this one, and then that's on the tongue itself, which is like at the very top of the foot, and then the lace holder. And again, not all sneakers will have this lace holder, but a lot of Nikes do, which helps to keep the laces in place and also keep the tongue much more straight. So now if we go into another example here, at the top we have this is a Vapor Max, a Nike Vapor Max. And again, so if you move from left to right, so this one's a bit more complicated because the other one that we saw had two different pieces, but this one does not. So this is all one huge Air Max sole. I guess if you wanted to get really granular, you could probably debate that there's two pieces to it. Maybe where the part that actually touches the ground is a bit thicker in rubber, where the actual bubble part could be the midsole. If you zoom in on here, we have the actual lace loops themselves. So again, this one does not have eyelets. This one actually has lace loops, which are literally just little pieces of fabric and little loops where the laces would go through to tighten the shoe. This one has a collar on it, which is a little tiny piece of fabric that actually kind of like hugs your ankle as you wear them. And again, this entire piece that's red at the top that kind of looks like this sort of knit material is considered the upper. Now if we look at this bottom sneaker, which is an Adidas Ultra Boost, we can start from the beginning. So here's the toe of the shoe, and again, all of the sneakers actually have a toe. I just wanted to call it out in this one in particular. This one actually has this sort of all-terrain sort of tape to protect the toe on it. This sneaker also has a cage, which is this sort of opaque white cage that you see that interlocks with the laces. This one also has a tongue tag that I didn't circle. And in this one, actually, you can actually see the sock liner a bit more. So the entire upper of the sneaker, the main part of the upper is that tie-dye material. And then the inside sock liner is the white part. So this one's very easy to see. This sneaker also has a heel cup, which is highlighted in red. And then again, the midsole and the sole. And this midsole is much more exposed. There's a couple of examples where the midsole is actually kind of encapsulated by like another part of the sole itself, which I'll show soon. And this one has what's called a gum sole, which is that brown rubbery piece that goes that extends from the toe all the way to the back of the heel. So again, here's our last example, which is the Adidas Yeezy Zebra colorway. So again, the entire upper is that sort of white and black zebra stripe pattern that you see. This one does have a collar itself too. Again, this one doesn't really have more, this does not have lace loops, so this one actually has eyelets, which you can see. This one is so this is a heel tab, which literally is like a tab of fabric that's on a heel that you can use to pull on the shoe. And then this whole piece is, you can either argue that it's either the midsole or the sole itself. So again, the sole is usually the part that just comes into contact with the ground. And then again, if you look at the bottom view of it, you can actually see that there's actually little slits in the sole and where you can actually see the Boost midsole. And the Boost midsole is literally just a type of material that Adidas uses, which is very squishy, very comfortable, very light and airy. Okay, cool. So now that we have a general understanding of sneaker anatomy, let's actually get into a bit more of the kind of details of what terminology you might hear when you're kind of engaged in that sneaker culture. You'll see, especially like on forums like Reddit, other sneaker forums, you might also see a lot of the same phrases, or even like on social media be thrown around quite a bit. So I think it's important that we at least cover some of these basic ones. So the first one that you'll hear probably the most is called DS, or this stands for the word dead stock. What this means, it's a shoe that's brand new, that's never been worn. Some people can kind of go back and forth in saying that this strictly means a shoe that's never been tried on either and never been worn, but you can go back and forth. Then the next variation of that is actually DSWT, or dead stock with tags, meaning that it's again a brand new shoe, and if it came with additional tags or lace bags, those are completely intact. The next one that you might see, I believe it's mostly a Nike term. This is QS, or Quick Strike, meaning that it's a limited collaboration, that it's a limited run, very limited quantities. That doesn't always mean that it's going to be a sought-after shoe. That just means it's going to be limited. And then the inverse of that is inline, or the older term is general release, or GR. This is a sneaker that's produced in larger quantities, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy to get. The next one you might hear as a phrase that people say quite a bit is on ice. So a way that people use it is keeping the sneakers on ice. And this is again just another way of saying dead stock, or that the sneakers are brand new. The last one, and probably one of the more important ones that we'll get into for the purposes of this video, is a colorway. So a colorway, by definition, is any range of combinations or colors in which a style or design is available. And so this is applicable across the fashion industry, but for the purposes of sneakers, it's essentially usually just color combinations that you'll see in certain sneakers. So let's give a couple of examples. The most common one that you'll see is bread, which is literally a combination of the words black and red. And as you could probably guess, the sneakers themselves that are considered breads are black and red. So here are some examples of sneakers that are black and red, or called breads. The next one is called Oreo, which, as you can probably imagine, like an Oreo, it's black and white. These sneakers are also a mix of black and white. Another one that you'll see across different brands is another one called Infrared, which is marked by this very particular sort of hot sort of red-orange color that's very bright. And it doesn't have to be with it doesn't have to be with black or any other color. It's usually just this one color. However, it's very commonly combined with whites, grays, and blacks. Another one that is a very Nike-specific term or colorway is Another one is UNC, which is University of North Carolina. So it's a university blue, which is actually a tribute to Michael Jordan, where he actually started playing college basketball. Now, to end off this section, colorways are not always just color-based. They can be actually used to describe one specific model of sneakers. For example, the Nike Dunk SB Chunky Dunkies is this one specific sneaker, and the Chunky Dunky is considered the colorway because it is part of the design, much like another example might be the Air Force One Valentine's Day Love Letters, which is, again, not specifically certain colors, but you can probably guess it's going to be white, reds, and pinks, but it's a very specific design used to identify this one particular model and style. So now that we've got those foundations set in place, let's get started with the first question. Why are sneakers getting so popular? The first part of this answer is social media, of course. So actually, since 2012, Instagram had 40 million users in 2012, and since then, they've expanded to over 1 billion users. And with that has come this rise of influencers, of people trying to be public figures, of people wanting to build their own following. And a lot of the early people that did this were pioneers in this. And so a lot of brands will actually partner with them to promote certain products that are coming out, to build up hype, to build up that excitement for this upcoming product. And so in order for all of these influencers to stay current or stay with the times and tied to pop culture, they have to be able to wear whatever's the latest, whatever's newest, and whatever's building up hype, which is where sneakers comes into play. You'll also see a lot of shows on YouTube, for example, Sneaker Shopping with Complex, where they actually have people from all sorts of industries that come in that are some of the best people in their industries to come in, get interviewed, to understand their relationship with sneakers growing up, what sneakers they're into now, and they actually ended up buying some sneakers. They've had guests from all different platforms, whether it's esports, whether it's YouTube, art, music, anything you can imagine. They have people from all of these industries, and with that, as they bring their following with them, their whole following is now exposed to this world of sneakers and gets them interested in the world of sneakers, and it gets them wanting to buy the same things that this person that they idolize has. Here's an example. Here's a picture of Team Liquid wearing Yeezy blue tints. And again, their whole following would have never probably even understood or known sneakers had they not been wearing them as they're doing their competitions and being on stage. And then that piques the curiosity. That starts that spark in getting them to want to buy this pair of like $400 sneakers. The second part, and one of the more important ones, is of course money. Along with those rising influencers, it's also brought people that actually realize that the sneaker industry is incredibly profitable. So in this era of individualism and entrepreneurship, many people, especially younger teens, have explored the world of sneaker reselling by buying limited sneakers and pooling with their friends to buy sneakers and then reselling them and then using that profit to then go and buy and continue that cycle. A pair of sneakers that's worth $100 between $100 and $200 in retail could be sold upwards of a few hundred to a few $1,000s because of the low production numbers and the exclusivity of these shoes. With the investment in the low hundreds, someone who's really committed and really sticks to reselling could build a whole empire, such as 2J's Kicks of Urban Necessities in Las Vegas, or Nico of Band San Francisco, Band SF. There's a lot of money that can really be made in sneakers. Now, before you head down to your local shoe store and buy up their inventory, I'm going to stress that they can make money. Not all sneakers are profitable, and there's a lot of research that the average person would need to do to try and figure out which sneakers would resell well and if it would be even really worth your time, because at the end of the day, you might end up with just an additional 20 bucks for several hours of work. Along with that, you're competing with people who have been probably doing this for years and likely have a lot of money, connections, and even things like bots to help them. To really drive this point, let's take an example of the Chicago Off-Whites. When they were first released, they were priced at $190 retail. In the weeks after, that price was jumping up to $1,300 on the aftermarket, which is over 8 times more what they were originally worth, for a profit of $1,100 per pair of sneakers. And now these sneakers are worth between $4,000 and $6,000 depending on the size. And if you multiply that by a bunch of sneakers, you've got a great cushion. Now this is an extreme example because there are several pairs of sneakers that have sold for retail, and maybe you could probably double your money, your investment, or resold even in the few thousands. But it's worth mentioning that a lot of these sneakers that sell for this are usually very limited releases, are incredibly difficult to get, or usually have a raffle system that you're probably not going to win. But allegedly, some of them have been accused of what's called backdooring, which is when they'll have a batch of very limited sneakers come in, and they'll actually sell them to people that are willing to pay a couple dollars extra, whether it's like $20, $30, even $100 extra, to then buy a huge amount of them in bulk and then resell them later on. And to wrap up this question, the third thing that I'll mention as to why sneakers are so popular is because sneakers tell a story through designs. They tell a story through thoughtful and intentional designs in these collaborations. Let's take a recent example from 2021. These are the Nike Street Hawker Dunk SB Lows. And so these sneakers might seem kind of like a weird mix and match sort of design, but these actually pay a special tribute to a lot of the street food vendors in China, known as hawkers. And this design is actually inspired by 6 incredible and traditional dishes from street vendors from 6 different regions in China. Another example that we have here are the Adidas collaboration with the Austin sneaker store, Nice Kicks. Adidas and Nice Kicks came out with this collaboration in 2016 to celebrate the opening of the San Francisco Haight-Ashbury Nice Kicks location. This tie-dye design is actually inspired by the history of the hippie culture in San Francisco, specifically in the Haight-Ashbury district where the store is actually still located. This neighborhood is still full of very fun hippie culture. So many stores actually still have a lot of posters on display from the original Summer of Love in the mid-1960s. Both Nice Kicks and Adidas actually ended up partnering again to release 2 newer iterations in the collaboration on a pair of Ultra Boosts in this black and white colorway to commemorate the 50th year anniversary of Woodstock. Okay, let's move on to the next question of why are sneakers so expensive? So I touched on this a little bit earlier in talking about how there's a lot of money to be made, but there's another part of it that can influence how much a sneaker might resell for and why they might actually be so expensive. And so some of the factors I'll touch on are not always going to be the same. They're not always hard and fast rules, but they're in general, mostly true. The first one is materials. So some sneakers are made with premium materials such as leathers, suedes, nubucks, satins, Italian leathers, which can drive up the price for how much a sneaker will retail for. But on average, this will cause a sneaker to fluctuate anywhere between $40 and $60 for the retail price, which is already between $100 and $200. But this can, again, influence the sneakers a little bit. An extreme example of this would be the Dior Air Jordan 1 colorway, which retailed for $2,000, which is over 10 times more what normal Air Jordan 1s retail for. But again, part of it is this collaboration. Additionally, more recognizable silhouettes like the Air Jordan 1 have carved out and made a name for themselves in the sneaker industry and have become icons that will never die off. These silhouettes, you're paying a markup for the piece of intellectual property and that specialty design that distinguishes that silhouette from really any other sneaker. The second part of it that I also touched on was collaborations. So a collaboration can be thought of as a partnership between a sneaker brand such as Adidas, Nike, Puma, Asics, New Balance, and a musician, artist, band, really, or any other outside group, and that come together to make this special sneaker designs. And so designers and artists that are really well known in pop culture help put a spotlight on the sneaker world because it also helps close the gaps or bridge those two things, those two audiences from either like a brand like Adidas or Nike and the audience of, let's say, a rapper like Travis Scott. And so this creates a response that's twofold. So both the collaborators now have a new unique audience added to their following. So the designer now kind of brings this audience from the sneaker brand. And then again, the sneaker brand also gets to create this very exclusive and limited time, very limited stock collaboration with this artist. Some of the most iconic collaborations in the past several years are in no particular order. Number one, the Travis Scott collaboration with Nike that resulted in at least 10 different sneakers. Number two, Beyonce's collaboration with Adidas creating the Ivy Park line of sneakers and clothing. Number three, Virgil Abloh's Off-White collaboration with Nike that resulted in well over 30 sneakers and probably more coming, several of which are Nike's top reselling sneakers on the aftermarket, such as the Jordan 1 Off-White Chicago. And number four, the Kanye West collaboration with Adidas to make the multi-billion-dollar Yeezy line that has released over 60 different pairs of sneakers, a lot of which are original silhouettes that did not exist before. And again, let's take a recent example, the Dior and Nike collaboration to make these two Air Jordan 1 highs and lows collaboration in this Italian luxurious leather. The third reason as to why sneakers might be very expensive are the quantities or stock. So this is the last one that I'm going to mention, but this is one of the things that can really greatly influence this, but is not always a hard and fast rule. Just because a sneaker is produced in large and low quantities does not mean that it's going to be very expensive in the aftermarket. But again, it should make a little bit of sense when we think of kind of like the supply and demand. If there's a lot of supply for a sneaker, if anyone can walk in at any point in time to pick up the sneaker off the shelf, there's probably going to be a lot lower demand for it. And inversely, if there's very low supply and the sneaker company does a lot to hype up and build excitement for the sneaker, there's probably going to be a lot of demand for it, where a lot more people are going to want the sneaker, thus driving up the resale sneaker price. There's also the exclusivity factor of knowing that not everyone can buy this pair of sneakers. They can't just walk into a store and get these. So once you get this one chance to purchase them and they're gone, you'll be forced to look at the aftermarket and resell, or know that you'll never get this pair of sneakers. And so although companies don't release the production numbers, you could probably speculate based on the amount of retailers that will receive the sneaker and sell them for retail, or also based on the resale price itself. Now, before you go investing your life savings to try and buy and flip sneakers for profit, it's important to note that the resale price can greatly fluctuate over time, especially if there are re-releases for popular sneakers. An example of this are the Adidas Yeezy 350 in the zebra colorway that I showed earlier. This Zebra's had a retail ticket price of $220 in 2017 when they were first released, and immediately the weeks following resold for as high as $1,500. However, since then, there have been at least 2 to 3 different re-releases of the sneaker where Adidas and Kanye West decided to create more and essentially flood the market with these, so that price dropped drastically down to $300. And it's important to note that price doesn't always necessarily mean quality, which hopefully is obvious, but it's not always obvious to everyone. So there's a lot of sneakers that retail or even resell for a high amount of, for a lot of money, kind of like some Balenciagas or even Dior B23s, where even under normal wears, they'll actually start to crumble, which would be really disappointing for a $1,000 pair of sneakers. Alrighty, number 3. What sneakers should I get? So you might be thinking, okay, I have a general understanding of sneakers, I have an idea of what goes into some of the prices and how it can drive up the price and what can make sneakers very expensive, and now I'm just ready to get my first pair of sneakers. Well, okay, in order to decide that, it's important to do your own due diligence and a little bit of research to understand what is it that you're looking for in a pair of sneakers. Are you looking for style? Are you looking for comfort, durability, just something for everyday wear that'll go with a lot of outfits? So I think it's first to think of what it is you want to prioritize before you go into buying sneakers, and also always do your price comparisons amongst different platforms like StockX, GOAT, and even sneaker stores around the area. So when choosing a nice pair of basic sneakers, I would say double check your closet and see what sorts of style, what sorts of colors you have, and something that can actually go with most of these. If your closet is kind of mixed, or you want to do something safe, I would say pick more versatile colors like navies, blacks, whites, and grays. Otherwise, if you're like myself and love a bit of color, by all means, then go all out. So here are a few of my very favorite basic sneakers that are great starting sneakers and that are much more affordable in price. So please note that a lot of sneakers will fluctuate in price over time, so try to make sure you, again, price compare and just don't jump into buying anything right away, because again, the price can fluctuate. The first pair are Adidas Ultra Boost. These are one of my favorite sneakers of all time because of just how comfortable they are. This Boost midsole is incredibly comfortable. The upper is made up of prime knit, which is like really hugs your foot, and these are great walking, casual running shoes for all sorts of things. And so this, as you're kind of looking into the different Ultra Boosts, there's a few different versions of these. I would pick these just because they are the most common ones that you can probably find for a reasonable price, and all the different colorways. I would say you can find some maybe that don't have a cage, that are laceless, and so there's tons of different combinations. You can check it out. There's a ton of different combinations out there, so really take your time to look through some of these. I would say though, what is great about Ultra Boost is that they're much more widely available now than they were maybe a few years ago. So you can run down to your local, let's say Shoe Palace, Foot Locker, Champs, and actually try on a pair to understand what your size is. But before you buy them, again, look on GOAT, because a lot of the ones that are sitting on shelves can actually go for under retail. The next one is the Stan Smith. This is such a timeless pair and a really classic Adidas silhouette that I've really liked, and you'll probably seen a lot on social media. This is one of the sneakers that like kind of fluctuates, where when it first came out, I think it was like in the 60s or 70s, a lot of people were wearing it. Then it kind of went away in like the 80s, 90s, and then now again it's back. And so this is such a timeless sneaker. This really goes with everything, especially in a nice plain white, or you can even go something with like a nice green accent. So this is one of my favorite sneakers that will go with everything. The midsole is actually pretty comfortable. I believe this Adidas one, it might be Ortholite. I'm not entirely sure on the midsole. The upper is actually leather, and I know what you might be thinking, that leather is probably pretty stiff, but this is actually pretty nice and soft leather, which is actually very comfortable. And I thought this heel tab itself, the heel portion of it, I thought it might kind of dig into my heel a bit and make it uncomfortable, but they're actually one of my favorite sneakers. The next one is the Air Max 1. This is one of my favorite pairs of Air Maxes by Nike because of just how comfortable they are, and they're actually available for a lot of sneaker stores for retail or under, depending on when you go in the time of the year. Especially around the holiday season, you might start getting some discounts off of these, and there's a lot of really great and unique colorways that I like. One of my favorites are the red and white anniversary pair, the strawberry lemonades, Tokyo mazes, and of course the animal pack Air Max 1s. The next sneaker that I'm going to talk about is the Air Max 90. This is one of my favorite ones by the next one is the Air Max 90. This is another favorite from Nike. These both, compared to like the Air Max 1 and the Air Max 90, you can both see that they both have an Air Max midsole, which is like this little plastic pouch with that's filled with gases, and it's actually very nice and spongy and responsive. As far as the upper, they can actually vary quite a bit between the two, and depending on what colorways you're going for. Some might be some might be leathers, some might be mesh or nylon or different fabrics. So there's a lot you can do with these. Another thing I really like about the Air Max 90s is that if you look at the shape of the toe box, it's actually a bit more square than the Air Max 1s, which is a bit more roomy, which is great for me because I have a little bit of a wider foot. These are also incredibly comfortable, and some of my favorite colorways in these are the classic infrareds that actually just re-released last year, the duck camos, the Mars landing, which actually use real pictures of the surface of Mars in this design, and of course you can never go wrong with a nice plain pair of triple blacks. The last sneaker I'm going to recommend is arguably one of the most recognizable sneakers. I'm sure every single one of you watching this has seen it at some point in your lives. I would be shocked if you haven't, and this is the Air Force 1s by Nike, also known as the Uptowns if you're from the East Coast. This one is such a great staple, and it just like the Stan Smith, is never going to go out of style. This one is a bit thicker in terms of the midsole and sole itself, which if you're shorter, it could give you a little bit of height. The upper itself does fluctuate quite a bit, I guess, as far as for what materials there are. So for example, if you look at the Stussy collaborations, this is a, I believe this is a hemp and canvas upper, which is nice, but I think for canvas, it's a good thing to note that they get dirty very quickly. There are leathers, there are suedes and different nubucks, and some of my favorite ones in these are for example, the Stussy Falso collaboration, the Paranoise 2.0s, which are a little bit expensive, the orange skeletons, and of course you can never go wrong with a nice basic pair of black and white Air Force 1s. I will mention though, again, for these, or for any of the sneakers, try to go into a store and see if you can try them on. These in particular do run a little bit big, at least for me. So I'm usually a 9.5 and most of my sneakers are 10. In these, I had to go down to a size 9, but I love how these look. Ultimately, if you're looking for another pair of sneakers or looking to get into the sneaker culture, make sure you take into account what's affordable for you. Don't worry about what other people are wearing. Just focus on something that's affordable within your budget, something that makes you feel good, and because you can't beat the feeling of putting on a nice brand new pair of sneakers, especially for something like a Stan Smith or a brand new Air Force 1. And also, it's important to, if you have a very limited amount of space you can have for sneakers, try to pick something that's much more timeless, again, like the Air Force 1s or the Stan Smiths, instead of flashy and now, like the Dior Jordan 1. So that brings me to the last and final question. What sort of gift should I get for someone who's a sneaker lover in my life? So here are some gift ideas that I myself would love to get as a sneakerhead. The first of which you could probably guess, are sneakers, of course. Although it's understandable that it is very difficult to find gifts for a sneakerhead, especially if you're not sure of their size, because the sizing can definitely fluctuate, where my sneaker size fluctuates anywhere between a 9 usually a 9.5 up until even 10.5 or so, depending on the sneaker. And I can understand too, you might not want to get them a sneaker they might already have. So I would say try to understand what at least what their size is, understand what sneakers they have in their closets, or even what they're might be more interested in that might be coming up. You could also go with the gift part, but it's also understandable. It's a lot less personal. So I would definitely say some more safe options would be something like a sneaker cleaner. So I personally use Rejuvenator, Jason Mark, and Crepe Protect to keep my sneakers looking brand new. You could also get them something cool like a sneaker design case for their phone. As long as you know what kind of phone they have, you can get them sneaker keychains or even some nice clothing that they would like in order to match kind of some of their outfits. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful, and I really hope you learned something. So if you could just take 1 second, again, if you didn't already, hit like, hit subscribe. It's completely free, and that little bit of your time goes such a long way for me into support. So look out for the next video coming soon, where I'll go deeper into the rabbit hole. I'm going to start looking at different brands of sneakers, what they bring to the table, and then what you should take into account when you're looking at some of these sneakers. Thank you again, and I hope to see you back here for the next one.